We can't just be better, we have to be the best. When I joined in 2000, the brand had definitely lost its way. It lost significant top-line revenue for like 4 or 5 years. They got too insular, looking at their own business versus the external factors. A lot of brands are digging their heels in on what they were versus what it needs to be. Some of our choices, I think, just weren't showing up with that brand power.
There has to be that kind of commitment to a long-term transformation because these things just don't happen quickly.
Bar is going to continue to raise. This is about amplification of what's true versus reinvention. Don't be embarrassed by what you are, because if you're not doing that, you will be.
In this Sports and Outdoor Mentors episode, I chat with John Graden, the global leader of the once great but somewhat forgotten outdoor apparel brand Marmot. John and I chat about everything that he learned from his time at the iconic brands of Levi's and The Gap. We also talk about the impact of closed-minded people on businesses, and how to take a brand's iconic heritage and make it relevant for today's consumer. My name's Dan Trapp. I'm a headhunter with 30 years leadership experience in the sports and outdoor industry. I really hope you enjoy this episode, and if you do, don't forget to leave us a review or a like. Thank you. Today, my guest is John Graden, the VP GM of Marmot. John has a more than 20-year merchandising background with legendary brands and retailers like Gap and Levi. John, thanks very much for taking the time to chat with me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No worries. So let's maybe set the scene a little bit, and then we'll come back to you. But I think, Marmot is a 50-plus-year-old heritage brand, and certainly, at least some people would say maybe over the last years has maybe lost its way a little bit. So I'm wondering, from a personal point of view, actually, what did you see when you took the job that thought, okay, yeah, this is the challenge, the next opportunity for me?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, I had lived in the Bay Area for 15 years, and I knew Marmot was up in the North Bay, and just always had so much respect for the brand and always wanted to get into the outdoor industry, which isn't always the hardest industry to get into if you're coming from the outside. So it was always on my radar. And then, of course, it's located in beautiful wine country in Sonoma. And so that was another draw. But really was a brand with a soul, which is usually what makes me decide to join a company or not. So my background in Gap and Levi is just having those brands that have meaning really always draw me in.
Okay, great. And we'll talk about some of the transformations that you've been leading since you joined. But if there's one sentence you'd use to describe kind of Marmot as it is today, how would you describe the brand today?
Yeah, I think our North Star right now is we're a beloved brand that's building high-performing gear to enable people to go outside and enjoy nature. And so that could be going all the way to the top of the summit of Everest, but it also could be just your high-performing activity that's even urban-based. So I think kind of being modern in the take of what outdoor performance means and not being blind to that. And it is a balance, right? So you have to kind of stay true to what made you famous, but also evolve to introduce the brand to new users and a new generation.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a super interesting and really relevant point, because I think what probably the industry would define as the outdoors has definitely shifted a lot in the last 10 years. As you mentioned there, you came from a couple of, big iconic brands and retailers with the Gap and Levi. I'm interested even, what have you been able to bring from those experiences and those businesses, and that's kind of helping you on the journey today to transform Marmot?
Yeah, great question. I think really it starts with the brand. And is the brand intact? Is the brand heritage or current state really clear to the consumer? And what's the value of the brand? And what are sort of evergreen values that you can just keep plugging away on? And I think when brands do a 180 and kind of abandon what got them there, it can go off the rails. And I think there was a moment where, through various reasons, Marmot did get a little bit lost in the woods. But now we're back on track where, what I tell my team and what we tell our customers is this is about amplification of what's true versus reinvention.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, makes sense. And I'm interested it's been 3 years now, so you're well entrenched to the brand and the industry. But looking back to those first maybe 6 months when you joined, what What was a surprise to you about the outdoor industry? What surprised you?
Well, I always knew, and I mean this with respect, that the outdoor industry is a bit insular, and sometimes doesn't look across the fence to kind of see what are other brands doing, not only in apparel but just brands in general, and how do brands show up for their customers, for their consumers, and how do you not just talk to yourselves as an industry so you can evolve with the consumer. And I think that's sort of the big elephant in the room right now is a lot of brands are kind of digging their heels in on what they were versus kind of what it needs to be to adapt to what the consumer is using the products for today.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But then on the flip side of that, was there something that you've kind of seen that you're like, oh wow, okay, that's something that you didn't expect, or some added value that was maybe either with the brand or with the industry that you hadn't expected?
Well, I think the positive, and I always had this admiration for the industry, is just the pressure on innovation and the pressure on making products that truly perform and that are incremental to what was before it. And I think in the fashion world, you don't always get that. A lot of times in the fashion world, it's about like, make me look good, make me look cool. And you might be chasing a fit shift in the market. You might be chasing a silhouette shift in the market, and that drives your consumption. But I think in the core of what outdoor is about is building high performing gear that helps the user stay outside longer, stay drier, stay warmer. And now I think what's also is important is how do you make it long lasting and more sustainable?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm interested to just spend a few minutes looking back at your time at Levi's. I mean, obviously, such a globally recognized, iconic brand, and again, another strong heritage brand like Marmot, and a brand that I think at the time you were there was also going through some transformations. So, looking back at your time there, what kind of stands out as maybe some of the biggest challenges, some of the things that were the most difficult to do when you were there?
Yeah, I think when I joined in 2000, the brand had definitely lost its way. It lost significant top line revenue for like 4 or 5 years. And what had happened is they got too insular, looking at their own business versus the external factors and where the consumer was shifting and the competition. And so they were very proud of their growth in the 80s and 90s and thought no one could touch them, which is always the kiss of death. And so I think what our challenge was how do we introduce the brand to that next generation? Because we're running the risk of skipping a whole generation of brand fans. And so I was tasked to really go after our 15 to 24-year-old market and reintroduce the brand for young men's and make it relevant to them. And so when I walked in the door in January of 2000, there was a lot of almost shame about the brand. And it was shocking as an outsider because as an outsider, you're like, this is the iconic brand that created a category called the blue jean. And so, my whole philosophy was don't be embarrassed by what you are, amplify what you are, and reinvent it for the next generation. And so that's what we started doing was to get back into a leadership position and define the category. And in about 2004, we introduced the slim jean. And then in 2005, we introduced the skinny jean. And it doesn't sound revolutionary now, but at the time, jeans were pretty baggy. It was boot cut. It was, kind of falling off the waist. And we kind of came to market with a bit more of an 80s influence because there was a zeitgeist of young users in Southern California wearing girls' jeans.
Yeah.
And so we kind of capitalized on that and it said there's a commercial opportunity here. And it was a commercial opportunity to also get into the lead position and drive fit. And that was a huge win for us. And then we were off to the races.
And so you said that was you were focused on the 18 to 24. Did I understand?
15 to 24.
Sorry, 15 to 24. It's really interesting because I guess a reflection I would have about the outdoor industry is that traditionally we've not been so good at engaging with that consumer, actually exactly that consumer that you were targeting at Levi's. I think we tend to get consumers, especially from an apparel point of view, I'd say, a little bit later in their journey. Whereas maybe at the early years, they're more into athletic or, lifestyle brands and maybe kind of ignoring completely the functional benefit of the product just to look good. Is that, I mean, I guess first of all, does that resonate? And is that an opportunity as an industry that we have and maybe should focus on to try and engage those consumers at a younger age?
It totally resonates, and I think our brand, did a pretty hard, pivot to that
Okay.
in, let's say, 22, 23, to go after that Gen Z, Gen Alpha.
Okay.
But it wasn't necessarily fact-based. And so we kind of chased into these oversized silhouettes. We chased into heritage retro designs,
Interesting.
but we also took some pretty big swings on some funky colors that just didn't perform at retail. And really, if we look at our facts of our brand and where we have the most strength, it's within the ages of 30 to 45, and it's always been that way.
Yeah.
And, our gear is not entry-level price. So this is a more expensive, proposition. And so you have to have some disposable income in order to buy into the brand.
Sure.
But I think there's opportunities for us to make sure that so let's say the bottom of the pyramid, that there's options for everybody, whether, it's income or age. But I think, a lot of people that are advanced hikers, you don't really maybe discover that at 15. You discover that as you enter your late 20s into your 30s. And I think that's where we win.
Okay. Interesting. So one thing you've talked about in other previous discussions, interviews, is building a bolder Marmot. But what does that actually mean in reality? What does a bolder Marmot look like?
I think it's just pride, right? And I think we lost our way of not having the pride for the brand and what it is, what it represents to the market, what it's always represented. And some of our choices, I think, just weren't showing up with that brand power. And it's similar to what I mentioned earlier about Levi's, where there's almost a shame or an embarrassment of what has happened or what it is. And so how do you flip it and say, no, we're Marmot and we matter? And our consumers weren't disappointed in us. And we have facts to prove that. So we do a lot of market research and on the brand. And our brand is quite healthy. So the bolder part would be now is how do we get products that we think will tell that story at a brand level? How does our marketing connect to those stories? What are some of those marketing choices that demonstrate boldness? And going to market, our sell-in materials, all of it is just more prideful and more confident, I think, on where we're going and what we mean.
So when you say that there was maybe pride was missing, you mean almost within the business, within the brand? Because with a consumer, it sounded like there was still a attraction to the brand, but it was actually more internally.
I think it was internal, and I think the pandemic was also a challenge for all brands.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us chased a false demand signal.
Yeah.
And so we had some extra supply. And then, you kind of feel like, okay, I didn't hit all the boxes on a financial performance that we needed to.
Yeah.
But I also was just looking at the way the brand was being marketed, and it just wasn't powerful enough. And our PDP images online, our website just didn't have that power and that boldness that we are really trying to tap into now. And also the clarity of message, like, what do you stand for? Why should I care?
So from a leadership point of view, that must have been, well, maybe if you can share a little bit of the journey to maybe rebuild that pride internally within the team, because from a leadership challenge point of view, that I guess that wasn't maybe so easy, or at least not a quick win. Maybe it wasn't difficult, but I'm guessing it wasn't something that was just like flicking a switch.
No. And I think the first step was kind of assessing the team that we had. And understanding kind of where we might have some non-believers, to be frank. And then how do we either, kind of say, hey, here's the new vision, and you either kind of come with us on the journey, or you have to decide if this is the right spot for you. And so turned up the heat, but also did it with a smile and did it with, I'm in it with you, which is how I lead. And so I think my team sees me putting in the hours, asking the right questions, being semi-annoying, but in a good way to raise our performance. And so, this is not a industry that's for the faint of heart. And when you're doing a turnaround, it's also not for people who might not be fully committed. So It was important to get everybody kind of connected and kind of live the collaborative lifestyle versus talk to it. It was real. Like, I wanted to see it really happening. So that was sort of step one. And then step two was, how do we get the creative funnel really filled up so there's creativity happening again, which is exciting.
Yeah.
It's exciting to the team. It's exciting to the customers. It's exciting to the consumers. And what I kept telling my team in the first year was, you can't tell them, you have to show them. And so that's what we started doing is, here's our new brand look and feel. Here's our new product hero stories. Here's our new way to engage with our consumer from a marketing perspective. And so the more we could show and demonstrate that we meant business, the better off the morale got, and the better off I think our customer base started believing in it.
Yeah.
And it probably first season out didn't really take hold because it's a little bit of show me again.
Yeah.
And it's that consistency that the buying community needed to see and the consumer.
Yeah.
And so even for my parent company, it was like, okay, you're here. This is what you said. This is what you're doing. Let's keep building on it. Let us see it.
I think that's always the challenge for in bigger groups, especially groups where maybe they're operating in other industries, that the realization of going through a transformation for a brand, particularly a performance apparel brand where the timelines are long,
right?
There has to be that kind of commitment to a long-term transformation, because these things just don't happen quickly, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a great call out. And my first line was Fall 25, which really got going in September of last year. And so we're only 8-9 months into, let's call it, the new point of view. And so, yeah, that patience is something we have to all remember, myself included, because you want it to happen now because we're already developed all the way, let's say 80% through Fall 27.
Yeah.
And starting to think about high level, what does Spring 28 look like? So we're ahead of the consumer, we're ahead of the customer. And so we have to remember the now, and how do we remember where we're at in that journey. But we're seeing some green shoots this spring, and so it's encouraging.
Great. And for me, I mean, I remember Marmot back in my retail days, which is a long time ago, which is kind of late 90s. And then, it's never been as big in Europe as it has been in the US, but it was still in those days seen as a, technical performance brand. I'm wondering, how you go about modernizing, making more relevant a brand like that, but still trying to hang on to those roots and that heritage.
Yeah, I think you have to take some of that, let's say, top of mountain, energy, but then how do you pull some of that innovation down so it's a bit more accessible for a broader audience, which is a big challenge because you don't want to water down your message. But you also want to kind of respond to the consumer audience you're talking to today. And what we hear from our retailers too is the percent of business that's highly technical is getting smaller as the consumer is really voting for versatility. They're voting for, 1 or 2 shells versus 5 or 6. And then they're asking for some lifestyle pieces that kind of round out, their life. And I moved to Seattle and lived there for about a year and was coming from New York City. And it was kind of eye-opening that in that really hardcore enthusiast market, they wear outdoor gear every day, head to toe, whether you're a banker, a lawyer, or a waiter, like that's what you wear because it is the lifestyle. So how do we, treat that? Because it's a Monday through Sunday, buying occasion or wearing occasion.
It's really difficult. And it's interesting there you talk about the Seattle and, how brands or how categories show up so differently based on the geography. Do you, when you're building the product and identifying your consumer, is there somebody that you kind of clearly have in mind, and is that somebody that's maybe linked to a certain geography, or is it not so narrow as that?
I don't think it's that narrow. I think if we did that, if we just focused, let's say, on the Pacific Northwest, the Seattle and Portland market, we would miss some pretty big opportunities within the country and the globe. And so recently I sent design and merchandising to the Southeast to go and explore the Carolinas, explore, Kentucky and Tennessee. And at the same time, we sent another designer and merchandiser to Europe. So we're kind of getting all sort of pockets of where we sell to get that rounded out thinking and to put all the inputs into those items. And the Southeast is actually a really big opportunity for us because there's more outdoor participation rates there than any place else in the country.
Okay.
But their activities are different.
Okay.
And so it's more water adjacent, it's more fishing, it's more camping.
Yeah.
Not as many mountains around to go do some of those sports. But, we want to kind of go get as much as we can while still staying true to the brand. But, distribution wise, we don't want to have big vacancies of geographies where we just don't trade.
Yeah. Okay. And what role do you think product plays in, I don't know whether rebuilding is too strong a word, but transforming the brand? I mean, is it everything, or what? Yeah, how important is product? What role does it play?
It's extremely important. I mean, no surprise. And I think what's important about it is, of course, you want consumers to find that piece, find that item, and purchase it and wear it and love it, tell their friends, and then we're off to the races. But I think if you build really great product, it's really a brand statement. And so if we get it right, our shell, our fleece, our insulated piece is really an embodiment of what the brand is, which is a really hard design challenge. But that's the one that I'm holding my team to. And we're kind of exploring, should we get back into the packs business? But to me, it has to be a statement on the brand, not just the pack itself.
Yeah.
Because to step back into that will be a big deal.
Yeah.
But I think on top of product, though, you have to ship on time. You have to have compelling marketing. You have to align yourself with causes that your consumer cares about. And you have to build products that are built for the long haul, which is good for the environment. So it's never one thing, but product obviously plays a huge role in it. But there is a point where you could have great product, but really bad marketing, or you could have really great marketing and really bad product. So everything goes hand in hand. And how I kind of work with my team is everybody's equal. So we're not marketing led, we're not sales led, we're not merchandising led or design led. Everybody's equal. And that way, everybody's accountable to bring their excellence to the game. And that's kind of where I set that standard. Again, if one leg of the table falls down, the whole thing falls down.
Yeah.
And that's something I kind of learned from a mentor of mine at Levi's, is just everybody's accountable. It's a democracy. And she always saved the receipts.
Yeah. That's interesting. Okay. So I was going to ask, actually, have coaches or mentors played any kind of role in your career? And obviously that's one example, but is that something that you've kind of proactively sought to have that kind of support throughout your career?
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes you can control that, and most of the times you can't, like who your boss is or who you work with. But I would say that working at the Gap when I did in the late 90s, that's when the brand was just on fire. And so with that said, the expansion of their top line was significant, and they were growing like 20% every year. Every brand was working for them, including Old Navy and Banana Republic. And therefore, it attracted A-plus talent.
Yeah.
There was just no dead weight because it would get sniffed out. And it was just really, it was an aggressive environment, but it was high performing. And I learned from the best of the best. And I think what I learned there foundationally was don't wait, act. And there's always a way you can change your performance probably sooner than you think you can.
Yeah.
If you ask the questions, if you rally the team, if you think outside the box, if you don't let barriers get in your way. And so that's something that I will never forget. And then the other thing I would say that the CEO of Gap at the time, Mickey Drexler, taught all of us was, even though we've got a 20% comp year on year, we should be slightly uncomfortable by that, because how do we comp that, and how do we expand, and how do we get better, and how do we keep the energy up and the revenue flowing? So that was sort of what I took away from that experience. And then I would say at Levi's was the power of a brand and a legacy brand, and how important that is to have that tenet stood up and healthy, because the power of that legacy was a purchase driver. And a trust was built in from the jump street on, well, if I choose Levi's, I'm choosing quality, I'm choosing durability, I'm choosing cool, I'm choosing longevity. And so there was so much there that helped the register ring that is really powerful. So that's what we're trying to get back at Marmot, is really getting that built-in trust more evident and reminded.
We've talked about the fact that when you were at Levi's, it was a transformation, and since you joined Marmot, the same. What's the most difficult thing, would you say, about leading a transformation? Is there something that stands out?
I think it is energy and commitment on the daily, on the weekly, on the monthly, and keeping the team, myself, my boss, everybody kind of energized for our vision, because it's a grind.
Yeah.
And what I tell my team is that we're a 52-year-old startup. And that's the mentality we're taking on, is there's no time to waste. Let's be aggressive. Let's let's build it. Let's shorten the timeline on when we can realize that vision. So we'll get, more funding and really be able to expand the brand like we want to. But I would say just keeping that high standard up, the energy up, and also to sprinkle in a little bit of fun. Because if you're not having any fun as a team, it's just a grind.
Well, my next question was going to be, how do you keep the energy? Because I fully agree, any kind of change or transformation like that, especially quite a fundamental one in both cases, it's, as you said, a grind is a good way of describing it. I mean, it's for several years, it's super hard work. So what is your approach to kind of maintaining that energy? As best as you can. There's no silver bullet, obviously.
No, I think you have to check in with yourself first and make sure that your person and your mood and your message that day is hitting the right note. And so as the leader, it's hard to always stay at that sort of 9 out of 10 energy, but that is the requirement and that is the job. And so I think the other thing is, again, providing some of that levity when you need it. And not just have it be so serious. So when we have our week-long adoption meeting or we have our sales meeting, it's how do we be determined on our goals? How do we be clear on our goals, but also build in some fun around it? And, do we need to go on a team hike? Do we need to go get, grab some beers? Do we need to, just kind of, hang out with each other and make some negative space for connection.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in that. And I'm also kind of goofy and silly at work, so that helps.
It's interesting because obviously with many of the examples you just gave, those are things that you can only do in person. And, obviously as we've all lived over the last 6 years, there's been this initially massive shift to fully remote and then some kind of balance. But for you, then it's really important that, the team are together, physically together and able to, do the day to day, but have the fun when it needs to be had as well. And I guess also the fact it's kind of reinforced by the fact that we're sitting here today, we're sitting in beautiful Riva in Italy. You've come to Europe, spent some time with the team here. So that personal one-to-one time for you is obviously really important.
It is. And I think it's just a fact that humans are hardwired for connection. And so how do we make that the heartbeat of the brand, heartbeat of what we do? But even on those days where we are working remote, there's still a way to bring your full self to that Zoom call and not let the physical barrier get in the way of connection. And so when we have those, it's, again, kind of adding that, here's what we're here to decide in this hour. Here's a little bit of levity to go with it. And then, of course, clear deliverables at the end of that meeting. But my folks that are remote are really strong people and strong leaders that really understand that they got to work just a little bit harder to connect and to keep that as part of their personal brand and the personal way they show up. Yeah. And I've got the right folks that can do that.
So as we mentioned, you have a really impressive career from a merchandising point of view, but also you touched on already a little bit consumer insights and brand strategy. And we talked about the consumer a little bit already, but I'm interested, what do you think some brands are missing today about the consumer?
Well, I mean, as it pertains to the outdoor industry, I think we all have the same struggle of that balance of having that high-performing portfolio, but also having some that kind of bleed into the lifestyle. If you want to get sort of the everyday head-to-toe Marmot fan, you have to have both. Otherwise, I think you're going to kind of have just one part of your business stood up and miss some potential revenue. But it is tough when you're a small to medium-sized brand. Most of the times you have to make that hard choice. So this was partly my speech to my team last week is, okay, what's our choice? Are we going to go back to, only summit seekers, or are we going to take it all the way down and just be lifestyle? And the big brands, such as the North Face, they have to do both, and they've done both, and they're the biggest. And they're the biggest because they do both. And so we're going to think big, act big, and do both.
Okay.
And really get surgical on what those items might be that are a bit more lifestyle driven. But I think there's a reason to have some of that, and to be someone's favorite brand means they might have a logo sweatshirt that's symbolizing their love affair with your brand. That's not a performance piece, but it's part of the closet. And that's the other thing that my team and I talk about a lot is what's in the closet, what's not in the closet. And, a lot of times when we'll introduce like a new fleece, let's say, and, a buyer might say, well, why would I buy this one versus your old one? Well, look at your closet. You probably have 8 to 10 different fleece pieces of varying degrees of warmth. And that also bleeds into your everyday wear, especially if you're an outdoor, avid fan. So we talk a lot about the closet.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
In today's multi-channel, multimedia world, how can, you be really culturally relevant as a brand? I mean, it's so difficult compared to what it was 20 years ago, even maybe 10 years ago. I think the landscape has changed so much. What's your kind of approach to try and make sure the brand is really culturally relevant?
That's a great question. That's probably the question for all of us. But I think, the first thing we had to do was almost get to baseline of a marketing voice. And that's what we set up in, let's say, late 24 and early 25. And then in the back half of 25 for fall, we started dialing that in a little bit more. And to me, marketing is always something that needs to be touched and finessed and massaged. And so in spring 26, and then for the balance of the year, the brand's going to be in motion more. The brand's going to be in activity more.
Okay.
We have to build that performance dream for the enthusiasts to stay with us, but also to attract that, what we call the occasionalist. So I think if we get too soft and we get too static, with our imagery, with some of our product choices, then the dream of I can perform in this brand goes away. And so I think that's what we're trying to get more finessed and get that tip of the spear a bit more defined, is getting back to the performance roots and building that dream for all of the consumers we do business with.
Okay. And so you're talking about making sure that from a communications point of view, the assets the creators that you're using it's people in action, basically, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah. So I think, the challenge from my parent company was to really obviously grow the business and to get it going quickly. And so the first sort of step into that was maybe a little bit more casual. And even the scenes that we were putting those models in were a little bit too casual.
Okay.
I think what we're doing now is what's true about the brand, and going back to, we have 5 brand values. One is heritage, one is performance, one is innovation. The fourth one is welcoming spirit, and the last one is slightly unconventional. And they all had kind of equal weight for the last, let's call it, year. And just as of recently, we're really standing up heritage, performance, and innovation, with performance taking the main stage. And so anybody that crosses the threshold of an outdoor store or even our own website, they're looking at our brand for something that will perform for them.
Yeah.
So we can't lose sight of that is the reason why we exist, and that's the reason why consumers come to us.
Yeah.
So we're going to, again, fine tune that more and get that dream more clearly defined.
Okay. Interesting. So looking back over your career, what's been the most difficult moment in your career?
I would say working with closed-minded people. I don't do well in those environments. I don't always see barriers. I just want to kind of get to the vision. And I know that probably sounds a little self-grandiose, but when people are closed-minded or don't see that anything is possible, I don't usually connect with that spirit. So if I've worked at a company or with individuals where there's a no or a can't, then it's like, well, what are we doing here, right? And I just really believe that anything is possible, and that's how my team is showing up for the brand these days. Based on just how I've set the stage for them.
Yeah.
Because we've achieved a whole lot in 2.5 years with, not the biggest budgets out there. And I'm really proud of where we're at today. And of course, we got more work to do, but we didn't see the barriers.
But that must be so. When you're in that situation, what's your approach to dealing with that situation? Or if you are working, I guess either with or for, or people working for you that have that mindset. And probably the answer is different for all of those situations. But I mean, yeah, what's your approach to kind of dealing with that?
I think you have to sell it. You have to make them care. And so we work for a parent company that's highly matrixed. And so they've got multiple brands that they're working on. And so my whole goal is I have to make them care about my brand.
Yeah.
So we move up in the queue, so we get better quality, assets or creative, whatever we need.
Yeah.
But to be a brand champion inside a company is extremely important, because if you're not doing that, you will be forgotten and you won't get the funds you need and you won't get the headcount you need. And so I am tenacious on making sure people care about our brand and that people know our wins. And that those are celebrated and recognized, because it all adds up to good sentiment, which then means they want to be a part of our party.
Yeah.
And so the more that, the folks want to be a part of the party, the more we get stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Looking back over your career, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think it might be an observation of a mentor. So maybe not spoken, but observed, which was, how do you show up and listen to all the cross-functional team members with their varying different points of view and be able to synthesize some sort of cohesive, consistent red thread out of that discussion? Even if it's a difficult one, there's a way to pick up a little bit of everybody's input and come up with a really good solution that's mostly workable.
Yeah.
It's never going to be 100%. I think that's one. And then this particular leader that I'm speaking of, his name was Steve Evans, and I worked with him at Levi's and Gap. But he also was extremely funny, and brought a lot of that levity and openness to the room. And what I observed is people wanted to rally around him.
Yeah.
And I think that is really powerful and not spoken about enough, is how do you get people to rally around you?
Yeah.
And how do you get more people singing your praises and believing in your vision than less?
Yeah.
And so that's something I've always thought about is, okay, I probably work with 100 different people. I need 95 on my side.
Yeah.
And if I have 40, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
And so, and it's not, not just about me, but the brand mission. And how do I get people to rally around that?
So how do you get people to rally around that? What's the secret sauce?
Well, I think you have to bring your whole self to work, which I am a huge believer in, and I encourage that for my team. I don't hire myself. I think that's the kiss of death.
Yeah.
I like the variety of personalities, of experiences, of thoughts. And I think, if we talk about diversity, it's not just diversity in the classic DEI sense, but it's diversity of thought. I think it's very powerful. And I think if you hire yourself, you're only going to get the business to a certain level. But if you have a lot of, differing opinions or different approach, but you all end up in the same spot, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah.
And then just, again, that consistency of showing up for everybody and adding to the treasure chest of achievements and accomplishments. So there's this demonstration of advancement.
Yeah.
I think if you just kind of run out of steam and there's nothing else to kind of achieve, then the whole team's going to feel that spirit and they're going to see it go by the wayside. And what I tell my team is we're never going to be there. Wherever there is, we'll never be there, because the bar is going to continue to raise. The consumer is going to continue to change. The competition's going to be, hungry as we are, if not hungrier, with bigger budgets perhaps. And then there's going to be these sort of, strong headwinds that we can't anticipate, like a pandemic, like some economic pressure somewhere in the world that's going to, be something we have to deal with.
Yeah.
So we better have our energy high, and our commitment high, so we can take on all those unexpected, what's around the corner challenges.
Yeah. What you were saying about diversity of thought, I think is super important. I think as an industry, that's it's a bit of a blind spot, actually, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're too quick to hire purely from within, which of course there's always a place and a role for that.
Yeah.
But I know personally from obviously being a headhunter that the value of being able to bring somebody in, with different experiences that has learned different lessons is super high. And just having the copy and paste and ultimately moving people from one brand to another brand within the same industry, certainly doesn't usually lead to innovation.
Right.
And I think, if we want to grow and get back to growth as an industry, we need to kind of focus on doing things better and doing things differently. And
Yep.
and there are plenty of people outside of the industry, well, much like yourself, that can hopefully help us do that. So yeah, I think that's something as an industry we need to kind of champion and do a better job of.
Yeah. I mean, I also entered this with an open mind because I certainly don't know it all. And I've listened a lot to my team, and I continue to do so because I don't have all the answers. I can't do it by myself. I think the secret there is, if you're going to bring somebody from the outside into any industry, is, do they respect the brand? Do they want to completely try to change a brand and what's true about a brand? Because then that's just ego.
Yeah.
And that has nothing to do about the brand. And the brand it starts with the brand and it ends with the brand. And what I tell my team, and now what they're saying to everybody too, is our brand is a gift. And you should treat it as such, with respect, with care, and know that our brand equity scores are really high on trustworthy, durability, longevity, stylish, high performing. Those are gifts. Those are attributes that any brand would die to have. And so how do we nurture that and respect it? It's all about the brand.
You mentioned a couple of times, obviously, that Marmot is part of a bigger group,
Mm-hmm.
and a public company as well. And having worked in many public companies, I know sometimes the pressure and stress that can come with that. So I'm interested, what's your approach to managing that pressure and dealing with stress personally?
Well, some days are better than others. Yeah.
For sure.
I would say that, from a balance perspective, haven't quite achieved that just yet because we're still rebuilding. And if I kind of let off, I'm not ready to do that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's been a lot of work, but it is the most fun I think I've ever had at a job, and the most connection to a brand, maybe equal to, if not just a little bit more than Levi's, believe it or not.
Okay.
Because it has this soul that is intangible, and it deserves to win. And what's really nice is our customers want us to win. And one of our key specialty stores said, when Marmot is strong, the whole industry is strong, and they want us to win. They need us to win. So that's really, inspiring for us to get up every day and kind of serve to that.
Yeah. But I mean, you must have things that you're doing to manage that yourself. Do you enjoy getting outside, and are you using those sort of tactics to kind of help managing that pressure and stress?
I'm trying my best. And right now I think the work is, it's like a healthy addiction kind of, but
yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, but I also do try to get out. Nature is restorative, as we all know. And my body knows when I've had too much of the computer, of the phone, and then I put down the technology, and yes, I hit the pavement and go hiking or go biking or do something that is not digital. That really seems to reset the table.
Yeah, absolutely. So from a consumer point of view, how do you think what's shifted in the last 10 years? I mean, what's the consumer, the outdoor consumer, looking for now that they weren't maybe 10 years ago?
I think it is different by age group, and I hate to bucket that, as a filter, but I think there's some truth of, there's a generation, let's say over 55, that the soft shell zip off hiker pant was the pant and the only pant to go hiking in. And I think if you're under 35 today, you might go climbing in a pair of Carhartt, right? So it's just completely different. And what our consumers have told us, we did a qualitative study, a closet study with Gen Z, and what they told us was versatility all day. Yeah. Like, I want some great active pants that I can do anything in, and that I can wear it from the gym to the hike to a casual dinner or whatever. And so I think that versatility is really important. And I think people are really scrutinizing price value. Yeah. And that's where versatility plays in. So if you can get a great jacket that can do it all, I think that is the difference of maybe, again, that more traditional consumer who wants and grew up with, I have a ski jacket that is for skiing. But if you think about how that ski jacket then became street fashion, over 30 years. It's an interesting transformation of something technical ended up every day. So how do you kind of then figure out what's new for this next generation for their everyday wear and building in that value? And I think it's important not only because it's their disposable income, but I think there's also a generation now that's like, you know what, I'll buy resale. I have no problem with that. And I think it's socially has a lot of currency as well for a younger generation to say, I bought this secondhand, I bought this resale. And so I think they're going to take that sentiment with them as they get older. So how do we get, kind of connected to that and make sure that our full price items have value, but do we need to get into that resale game, which we're talking about?
So we've spoken a lot about heritage brands, and now, ironically, my mind's gone blank as to heritage brands within our industry that have maybe disappeared. But I can think, for example, technology brands, brands like Nokia, that, were synonymous, with phones, obviously, back in the day, that have now pretty much disappeared. So within our industry, what do heritage brands need to do to make sure they don't suffer the fate of businesses like Nokia?
Well, I think consistently a heritage brand that goes away is the one that was just looking inside the building and they weren't looking outside at market factors, at the shifting consumers, and being open to change. And of course, you don't do it overnight. It's a gradual process of product evolution, of marketing voice evolution, of brand activation. And that has to be market current. And, coming from Levi's, which was established in 1853, we had these rich archives. And a lot of times the new designers would go in there and get inspired by and want to reproduce exactly that thing. But it can get dusty. And I think that's usually the risk is if you only reference the past, then you're not kind of moving the dialogue and moving the visuals forward. You're not moving the innovation forward. And that can become an internal love affair for the brand versus an external business proposition. And so that's always the moment where you have to say, okay, what's the best DNA of the brand that's evergreen, that will always be, but then what's the wrapping paper, if you will, that goes with today's consumer and of course, tomorrow.
So our audience is made up of a mixture of future and current leaders within the industry. So what advice would you give to some of those future leaders?
I would say just keep that beginner's mindset alive and well, and to stay curious and open to market conditions, to the shifting consumer, and to what your brand is capable of versus kind of limiting yourself or limiting the brand and putting it in too small of a box, or even putting yourself in too small of a box. So I look back on some of the things we've achieved as a team in the last 2.5 years, and it's kind of surprising in a delightful way of all that we've done in a short amount of time because we just did the work and we believed in it and we didn't let those barriers limit us. So I think that's just what's more exciting and more fun about being a leader or being a part of a brand is to stay open.
Yeah. Okay. And looking ahead to 5 years, maybe more, 5 to 10 years. How would you want the consumer to feel about the Marmot brand in 5-10 years time?
Yeah, my goal would be that the brand is accessible to a lot of folks, whether that's through our product range, our distribution strategy, and that people get either reintroduced to the brand or introduced for the first time, and that we can expand our distribution in a responsible way that allows that to happen. The risk is, if we're out of sight, we're out of mind. Yeah. And so that's our big challenge right now is to make sure we're in front of consumers. And there's so much noise out there, not only for the outdoor industry, but just in general, so much noise, so many things to buy and so many, things that you could spend your money on that we have to be on our A game. Yeah. And so I think the sentiment I'm looking for from a consumer would be, Marmot makes great high-performing gear that enables me to get out there in nature and really lean into the benefits of those restorative properties of nature. Yeah. And then I think on top of that is that our gear lasts. I think the most sustainable thing we can do is to make items that people want. And that might sound simple, but a lot of times we make items that people sort of want. or
Okay.
might want.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think what is so powerful about Marmot is that when I tell people I work for the brand, they lean in physically and they're like, I love that brand. I love Marmot. I have a tent that I've had for 22 years. I have an insulated jacket I've had for 18 years. And it's been a part of my life and my journey. And I think that's the power of the brand.
Yeah.
And not every outdoor brand has that where you hang on to it because it means something to you. And I think there's something unique that we can build on for Marmot. And that's inspiring.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, having that kind of strong emotional connection from a brand point of view is super powerful.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's like the only thing, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not the only thing, but it's super important.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's that makes a lot of sense, but also incredibly difficult to do, I guess.
Yes. And so, that's again, kind of going back, like eyes wide open, like where are we hitting the mark and where do we have some opportunity to shore up a product story, or product performance, and making sure that we're laddering back to that high quality, that we're famous for. And so relentless on that with my team is we can't just be better. We have to be the best.
Yeah. So, not wanting to kind of push you to the future too much, but if today was your last day and you were going to hang up your Marmot jacket and retire on the bay somewhere in San Francisco, what would be your final message to your team?
Keep fighting the good fight. Keep loving this brand and treating it with care, and to take it further than I ever could. That would be my message.
Brilliant. Great. Well, thank you, John, for taking the time to chat with me today. I really appreciate it. It's obviously a very busy week for you. You've just had your sales meeting and you've got the outdoor show in a couple of days. So I really appreciate you taking the time to chat. It's been
no problem.
great.
It was a lot of fun. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
I hope you enjoyed my chat with John. Next episode, I'm talking to Ed Bartlett, the founder and CEO of Costume, a bike apparel brand that's breaking all the rules, leveraging a pre-order model and artist collaborations to drive their scale. I look forward to seeing you then, and thanks again for your support.